Devaraj, welcome. Thanks for taking the time to speak with me today.
Well, thank you, Todd. It's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be here, man.
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of start by complimenting you, I guess. I was trying to research, got interested in sort of body-based therapy, like especially like Reichian therapy. And then I just started kind of researching like crazy. And then talking with the AIs, and it's like, oh, well, what's all the students of Dr. Reich, and what did they develop? And then so I came across Alexander Lowen, came across bioenergetics, and then just really started Googling and researching every single lead I was coming across, and then I just kept coming across your name, and kept finding your stuff, and then really what I see you doing is really interesting. It's really unlike anything anyone else is doing in terms of making this content very accessible. And so, yeah, thanks
Mhm.
for taking the time to speak with me.
Hey, no problem. My pleasure, man. My pleasure.
And so, yeah, so I bought some of your books, and I, listened to some of your YouTube videos. I started doing the bow and arch every day for the last couple of weeks. So I'm pretty new to your material. I've not finished any of your books yet, but have looked at several of them. And then so I just thought it'd be good to learn more about your background, and then
Sure.
also ask questions that would be kind of useful to anybody getting started. And so
hmm
maybe we could start
hmm
with your background.
Yeah,
Um,
sure. I mean, I never set out to become like a therapist and stuff. I came from quite a what would be considered damaged kind of background of high trauma and stuff in the UK, and adoption and things like that. And I kind of dropped out of society about the age of 2021 and was sort of living on street level, squatting and stuff like that, which was popular in London at the time. And then in my late 30s, I kind of, having drifted around quite a lot and been involved in all sorts of different scenes and dodgy things as well, I kind of somewhere took stock of myself a bit and thought I need to change. I'm drifting into more just alcohol use or drug use or crime or whatever, and I need to change. I need to do therapy. So having had that kind of revelation in my mind, aged about 38, 39 or something, I just threw myself into the world of therapy and discovered different kind of things going on in London and workshops and therapists and sessions and all of this. And through that process, somehow, or quite quickly, really got kind of tuned into an underground scene that was surrounding the former Indian mystic Osho of the Bhagwan at the time. In fact, it was about a decade after the Bhagwan had passed away, but there was still quite a big scene in London, and I felt it was very vital and exciting and stuff like that, and I just jumped into that. And to be a part of the kind of Osho scene, certainly that strand of it, you had to do groups. You just had to do groups. So I ended up doing a lot of therapy at an institution, Osho institution in Holland, in the north of Holland, near Alkmaar, and in Egmond aan Zee. And then I also kind of got involved with an Osho community in the UK. I kind of dropped out a second time, really, out of London life, and just moved into this community in the south of the UK and ended up living there about 17 years. And in that time, I continued with the therapeutic work I was doing in Holland. And I also I was getting feedback, now you need to become a therapist. And I was like, the only thing I'd really trained in was in construction as an electrician, which was a job I'd done before. But I didn't really want to go back to that anyway, getting older, always working in dusty environments and stuff and that kind of thing. So I thought, okay, therapist, why not? And I started to run workshops. I was doing less one-to-one work and more like just group therapy stuff, which I'd been trained in. And then I'd never really been trained in bioenergetics because there aren't really many trainings around, quite apart from anything else. But I picked up quite a bit of knowledge of it. I trained more in group therapy with the school in Holland, which had some bioenergetics in it, but was more around catharsis, emotional expression, very intense kind of therapeutic processes, encounter therapy, primal, this kind of thing. And And at some point, this bioenergetic thing started to gel a bit more with me as something that people could also do on their own. At a certain point, I started to move out of the community environment a bit. And I ended up starting a YouTube channel on bioenergetics because I actually initially was looking for more bioenergetic postures to complement my own work. And I realized that bar one strongman guy in Florida, good guy, Elliot Hulse, no one was really creating content for bioenergetics. So I thought, okay, well, I'll jump into that gap. That was about 2016, something like this. And I just immediately had this thing like, instead of following the usual kind of commercial thing of just always trying to get people to like and subscribe and sell, I thought I'll just give away a load of stuff, and just see how that goes. From the back of that, people started asking me for more paid for content, even though I was giving stuff away. And so I ended up just before COVID, creating a course called The Journey, a very intense 52-week online course, and then that immediately became popular when COVID started and people were kind of put into lockdown and they wanted to move their energy and do something constructive whilst they were kind of trapped in their flat. And from the back of that, I created more courses. I started to write books because, it's going tracking a little bit further back, but people tend to assume when they come to this work that it's all to do with Reich and then Lowen. And in a sense, yes, but in a sense, no, because this therapy really emerged from basically drug treatment centers in the US in the 1950s onwards, where the concept of rehab was kind of created and as an alternative to prison, because hard drugs, heroin, this kind of thing were a big problem in post-war American society. And so a lot of psychologists started to get involved in these very intense rehab centers, and they started to kind of rewrite the book of therapy because drug addiction traditionally is not easy to treat. So it became like an experimental zone where very intense therapies were used. Some of Reich's work was taken and kind of explored and expanded in that kind of underground environment of the rehab center. And then there was a crossover from that to the Osho scene from the 70s onwards. So these two big kind of underground centers were scenes rather, where a lot of this stuff emerged from. In reality, it didn't come direct from Reich, Lowen, schools and stuff. It kind of submerged for 20, 30 years. And then because it had submerged and because no one was really writing in that scene about the actual techniques, which was, that problem was exacerbated by Reich because he had an injunction, as I understand it, on anyone writing down the techniques. And so there was very little written down, very little on video. And we were, in my view, by about 2020, kind of hitting the point where a load of this stuff was just going to drop off the kind of the human map of knowledge, where the therapists who knew the techniques had kind of died or retired, and literally a whole ton of this stuff, which I'd been the kind of recipient of in different ways, was going to just disappear from human knowledge. So I felt, this is a long story, but I felt very motivated to kind of start writing, start creating, putting more content out from that basis. And that then became successful and kind of, I took that as a kind of green light from existence or whatever to keep going along that track. And that's essentially what I've been doing from that time.
Oh, wonderful. What a journey it sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, it's also because, I myself have needed to do a lot of this kind of work as well, so
Yeah.
that's, it's also kept me engaged, with the scene, and working on different aspects of my own personality and my own physicality, my own body, so it's all kind of been, like a yes for me, or win-win as they call it.
Yeah. Yeah. I was getting a sense from your work of it felt like you're on a mission a little bit. And I think that comes from having needed the work yourself, having benefited from it
Yeah.
yourself. And so that kind of,
Yeah, I mean, it was also from the Osho scene,
yeah.
although I wasn't connected with Osho himself, he died about 1990, but the scene was still very kind of, what's the word, proselytizing or apostolic in its own sense, that you're going to go out
Okay.
there, and heal the world and change the world and all of this kind of thing,
Okay.
and that's died off for me quite a bit because I think it tends to cross people's boundaries too much, that they may not want to go on this journey that you want to lead them on, So
Okay.
I've learned to be much clearer with boundaries around that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, it gives me energy as well doing this work. I'm 65 now, but like the work gives you energy, so you can keep projecting yourself out into the world.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something else I wondered is because if you can remove blocks in your system, that kind of unlocks your potential, I guess, your
Yes.
motivations and things like that. Yeah.
Yes, exactly, and it gives you energy. In the early days of psychology with Freud and stuff, energy was a very important factor. They called it libido, but it was more like, which is, understood as more sexual. But I mean, it's fundamentally talking about your basic drive. But kind of from the 50s onwards, for various reasons, drive became lost, and psychology became a lot more about just analyzing your thought patterns and stuff like that, which is okay. But if obviously drive is this kind of motor, it's the diesel inside your body. So getting it up and getting clearer obviously is useful as well. And that strand of psychology has kind of become lost in the modern era.
Yeah. Yeah. And then maybe we should jump back just a tiny bit and just
Sure.
kind of explain what bioenergetics is and for someone brand new. Um,
Yeah. I mean, basically, you put your body in some weird kind of position and you breathe and you feel. That's most of it. It's certainly in terms of like what we'd call static stretches, like the bow. You put your arms up, you're standing, you press your pelvis forward, you squeeze your arms back, and you just try to breathe and feel your body. And the reason this is supposed to help you is because it's stretching specific muscle groups where holding patterns may exist. And holding patterns are like the residue of trauma and conditioning, what psychologists call from early on in our life. And by breathing and feeling and putting the muscles under certain degree of intelligent stress, you bring these kind of holding patterns to the surface so they can be released, and then more energy can flow, more emotion can flow through you. Energy and emotion tend to be entangled. So that's kind of, in simple terms, all we're really doing. It does look, a lot of bioenergetics looks a bit like yoga. It looks a bit like something you might do down the gym, but it is different in that it is really focusing psychologically. It's not
okay.
about, okay, I just want to have more flexibility. It's more, or okay, I want to get my weight down. It's more like I want to understand and resolve my inner dynamic, psychologically.
Yeah. Do you see any risks to this kind of work? I remember so one of the books I came across was the Jack Willis book. Um, and kind of early on in that book, he says, "Oh, read the whole book. Uh, make sure you do it exactly in order." There's a little bit of fear in that book,
Yeah,
and then it occurs to me that book, the people that are going to read that book maybe aren't going to follow up with the exercises. The people that will jump in and do the exercises maybe aren't going to bother to read the book, and so you've really taken a different tactic, and
yeah.
yeah,
I mean, the first thing to say about Jack Willis is that it was awesome that he wrote this book. The history of
yeah,
it, as I understand it, came from his interactions with a guy called Chris Hyatt, neither of them around anymore in the early 2000s. And then he ended up writing this long book, which you've got a copy from Amazon or whatever, hard in softback, but you can also download it as a PDF. Same book, as far as I know, online from his website, and so totally free. And it's an awesome book because it's the only book really that actually has a ton of not so much bioenergetic exercises, but Reichian breathwork exercises. It just has a ton of that stuff. So on that level of like putting stuff out there, it's absolutely mind blowing, and it's really really awesome. And then you come to Jack Willis's style of writing, which, I mean, I did an interview with a guy who runs Falcon Press or New Falcon Press, Nick Farcher, and he knew Jack Willis, and he said, "My God, that man was so rigid," and that does kind of come across a bit in the writing, in my experience, because I trained in group therapy, which is more intense than bioenergetics as a general rule, and then worked a lot in groups. The only people who are going to get in problems are people who likely coming from quite significant mental health condition. Typically, people with a history of psychotic episodes, you should be careful, bipolar. Those two categories. Also, people from that kind of psychological background, psychiatric background, they tend to be attracted towards spirituality as well. So that when I lived communally and was running a lot of workshops and programs and stuff like that, and I had to screen people a little bit who might not be suitable, and obviously tell them in a nice way, that they don't feel bad about it. It's like, you're looking for those kind of backgrounds, and people who don't have that history, are probably okay to go for it for the simple reason that their ego will just tell them to stop, basically, if it goes too far. The ego, in a sense, is this kind of choke point in the human psyche, which can usefully regulate, the traffic of energy and feeling going through the body, and it will kind of just pull you away, or your nervous system will come in and pull you away. So for most people, I feel like, you can try this stuff. Don't just start doing 2-hour sessions when you've never done anything before, but, do it sensibly. But you can try this stuff, see how it goes, and see if you're drawn towards it, see if it's useful for you. In like 15 years of actually running groups and some quite intense stuff, it's very rare I get any kind of real problem with clients or with group participants. I mean, partly because I tend to say in advance, I don't dress it up. This workshop is going to be intense. So people know. If you want to come along, it's going to be a bit confrontational, full on, that kind of thing. I think as long as you do that, it's been my experience that it's fine to try these things. To go on my YouTube and give it a crack. And if it just feels like too much, stop. And if you're still very keen, just to introspect a little on why it's getting intense. Maybe join the Telegram support group there and ask around, whatever, and just and then progress on like that. I don't think the techniques are super dangerous. The other side to that is also, being a workshop leader myself for many years and still, there is, quite apart from the intensity of the technique, there's also the side of a workshop leader where it's like, well, I know all these techniques. I don't want to give them out to people, they're going to have to pay me a few grand, a few $1,000 or whatever to come and do my training, and that's the kind of other side of it. You've got the side where Reich was basically, as I understand it, prohibiting the dispersal of this material into the wider frame, except to people. He insisted that people trained as a medical doctor before he would take them, and all of that.
Yeah.
And then workshop leaders coming up from the scenes I've described from the underground, they've got this tendency to hold what they know close. It's a normal human primate kind of tendency. You're not just going to start giving stuff out, but so that's the other side of it, where you can kind of like, yeah, this stuff's really dangerous, man. But and part of it is, because I want you to come to me and pay me money to do this stuff, So that's like the other side of it. That said, I mean, there certainly are very intense techniques, more from group therapy, but I would hesitate to put out just for people,
Yeah. That's a great answer. I think, I like the approach you're taking. I think ultimately that's the approach that in this day and age actually does better, because you kind of by being kind of open and giving away some part of it, it kind of generates more interest and notoriety, and that's what actually gets people coming in and interested in what you have to offer. So I think,
and I think
I think it's a win-win. Yeah,
it's a win-win, and also it's like therapy traditionally in psychology, I mean, apart from the scenes I've described, it's traditionally, it's come from kind of, the client group was all kind of rather rigid upper middle class people from Central Europe originally, and it's kind of
Yeah.
held itself like that. If you're in the, I'm not in the therapy scene in the west coast of America, okay, but what I understand about it from people who are and other, it's a little bit sort of like a giant cult for the well-off middle classes, and they are not the only client group in the world. There's a lot of, it's actually more orientated towards younger people who often
Yeah.
don't have ton of cash,
Yeah.
because they're just not at that phase of life. And they also don't necessarily want to massively introspect upon their relationship with their parents or whatever, because they've only just escaped from their parents, So it's
Yeah.
like, this kind of body stuff can really appeal to them and they don't have a ton of money. So it's like, I think super valid to just make it available to people, to different potential groups.
Yeah. How should someone new really approach this work, would you say?
I would say, just do some foundational exercises like the bow and arch, try and do them daily, for like maybe 3 reps of the bow and this arch posture. You can learn them from my YouTube or other places, and like do that like on a 2 minute ding or 1.5 minute ding, bow, arch, bow, arch, bow, arch, like 3 reps, 3 sets. Spend a couple of minutes just lying on the floor, a couple more dings just to kind of integrate and feel your body. And try that for a month, and see how it goes. If you notice positive changes in your life, in your social life, in how you relate to people, how open you feel, how grounded you feel, this kind of thing, and just basically try it,
Yeah.
If you want to be more focused, you can do something like my Reichian character structure quiz, which is like one of these personality quizzes where you answer a load of kind of questions about what you do in this situation and you try to be honest, and at the end it kind of outputs your character structure, which was another Reichian thing, which can be a good mental kind of model that you can use alongside the body work to direct how you look at yourself, to direct yourself therapeutically. If you're very oral, and you have to have connection all the time, or if you're very rigid and need to be in control, or you're very much leaving pattern and you're always living in abstract worlds, it can be useful kind of adjunct to sort of theoretical adjunct that you can use alongside the body work.
Cool. Yeah. I noticed, yeah, that's another question I had is like in some of your books, there's like, here's the exercises, you do them in order, or you have your self-study course where you kind of do it in order. But then some of your videos, and like one of your books is on anxiety. So some of them seem to be like prescriptive. It's like, oh, if you're dealing with this, here's exercises you can go do.
Yeah.
How do you see kind of going in order versus looking for prescriptive exercises that are targeted towards a particular issue someone's facing?
Well, I guess it's really up to the individual. It's like,
Yeah.
what's your initial point of contact or something like that.
Okay.
If you're struggling with anxiety, learning to feel the body more is useful, and understanding the role
Okay.
of the nervous system and that kind of thing. And there's certain exercises and certain understandings you can have about something like anxiety that can help you move forwards. And, maybe that then kind of acts as a springboard to get you more into this kind of work, or maybe not, or whatever. Or someone else may not have a clear idea of what they want to get from something. That's quite common as well, but they just feel like, I want to work on myself in some way. There may
Okay.
be an understanding underneath, but they haven't really quite owned it yet. People in their 20s sometimes have quite strong, slightly Teflon coated ego. And then, as we all did, and still can have, and then, they haven't quite got the feedback from the universe of what bit they need to work on, but there's still a knowledge in their mind, like, I want to do some of this stuff, So it's like, then they can also get engaged with it all.
Okay. Yeah. That sounds good. So both approaches are valid. And then what do some of these exercises, they do really build on prior exercises though, is that right?
Well, I guess to a degree,
Okay.
there's certainly some kind of more foundational exercises that you could usefully just use. And my
Okay.
general viewpoint is that pretty much everyone is in a high state of repression and societal conditioning. So, we're talking like 50, 80% suppression or something like that. So, any of these exercises could be useful. Some are more foundational, others are more, perhaps a bit more specific towards certain kinds of issues and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said 50, 80% repression. So your view would be even a normal, healthy, well-adjusted person is a little bit dysfunctional. Is that right?
Well, I don't know if dysfunctional is the word I'd kind of use, but like, on a deep level, you know,
Yeah.
are you trying to create social functionality to get your needs met, or are you trying to find out who you are? Because
Okay.
I mean, when I initially got into therapy, like I said, in my late 30s, I just wanted to be functional, to be able to get like a girlfriend, to be able to get like
Yeah.
a job that wasn't crime, basically.
Yeah.
So simple kind of tangible social goals that I wanted to achieve, to get a better friendship group that weren't all just alcoholics and crims, these kind of
Yeah.
things. But at some point I became intrigued. Okay, I kind of achieved that. Okay, I got more socially functional, but then there's still deeper things going on inside around who really are you. What is it to be human? What is it to be alive? What is love? What is being? This kind of thing. So it's like traditional psychology, and particularly the more cerebral ends of it, which can be very, very useful. In a sense, they're trying to make a program that's running in the frontal lobes run better, rather
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
upgrade or bug fixes, to give a kind of computery analogy. But what's going on underneath this little social personality program that we're trying to run. Some people may be interested to look deeper. It's up to them.
Yeah. 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 So that's a kind of another question I had is, do you see this as kind of relating to spiritual work? It like it can be towards just being more functional in the world, but also uh, is the end goal, is it getting into something spiritual, or how would you describe that?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
my main focus these days is really very simple. It's like, okay, you've got to feel your body more, and expand the level of sensation in the body, because essentially when conditioning from society or trauma comes in, it shuts down the degree that you can feel. Just as literally just the sensation of your body, particularly the backside, particularly the belly. It tends to leave this part kind of with sensation because that's where we meet the world. But the rest of it gets shut down. Now, as you start to expand the sensation of the body using these kinds of techniques, you notice that as you get more grounded, more open, you can be more socially functional. You don't have to kind of cut off with weird behaviors in some situations where you were before. You don't have to necessarily control the environment as much as perhaps you did before, or whatever, or always be right, or whatever it is, or always cling on to someone and just never even think about what your own opinion is or whatever. You notice that stuff changing, but as you continue to expand the sensation of the body, it's like you are kind of merging, with a deeper kind of, like in the Buddhist sense, ground of all being, or in the
Yeah.
kind of continental philosophy, body without organs, this kind of idea of a kind of deep field of energy that kind of exists somewhere, that we are connected to it, but we've kind of cut ourselves off from it, from our societies, and you can recreate that connection. So it's spiritual in that sort of merging sense.
Yeah.
And you may get attracted to esoteric ideas, or the chakras, or manifestation, or whatever. It's whatever comes along on your journey. But I
Okay.
definitely see it that it can be, you can do the social functional bit, and then you can go deeper into kind of deep spiritual experience, or deep kind of inner merging experience. It's less achievement based spirituality, but more kind of a deep inner journey, or heart journey.
Okay. Neat. Neat. How would you say, like, bioenergetics and the Reichian breathwork you teach? How do the two relate? And how would you if you're interested in both, how would you, um, you
I mean, I
know?
get asked that question because I have like a course on each, basically on my
Yeah,
website,
yeah.
a course. And then for most people, I think doing bioenergetics first is kind of good. It kind of gets you,
Okay,
it clears certain layers of stuff out, you know. And then when you start to do, you see, the bioenergetics is mostly, not exclusively, but mostly done standing up.
mm-hmm.
And the Reichian breathwork is mostly pretty much 90-95% done lying down in a specific position. It seems that for most people, doing the bio first kind of allows the breathwork stuff to go deeper. You know,
Okay,
Reich's work is quite intricate and complex compared to other schools of like breath work which have come up in the West later on after Reich. You know, this is a lot more sophisticated. Not that that necessarily makes it better, but it's a lot more sophisticated. And it seems like to really get into it, it helps to have taken some of the holding out to start with. A lot
okay,
of work with the breath, you know, it's working with basic blocks around the throat, blocks around the diaphragm, you know, this big kind of muscle underneath the ribs, and blocks around the pelvis. You know, not just that, but with the breath work, it's doing that quite a lot. It's trying to get the diaphragm open again so that the person can breathe more deeply, you know, get the abdominals kind of engaged in the breath, and try to kind of stop some of this. We usually learn to kind of regulate breath, control it from like the muscles around the neck and the throat, you know, which is unhealthy, but it enables us to kind of. It's like we're trying to kind of we've got this wild kind of Promethean energy inside, and we're trying to just keep it under sufficient control to project a nice personality out. So you know the muscles of around the throat, the sternocleidomastoid and scalenes get kind of co-opted into this general endeavor, and then they're kind of tensing a lot and just trying to keep everything under control. So it looks to slowly unravel that, you know.
What does it take to be successful in this work? Is it, is it just kind of keeping a schedule and really just being consistent, or what else would you say it takes?
No, I'd say that's pretty much it, really. I mean, basically, it's like, especially if you're working on your own, you know, you're going to need
Mm-hmm.
to develop a certain level of discipline, because I think what becomes clear after a while for most people is like, we're really just, you know, we think we're running our life, but actually our nervous system is running a lot of our life, particularly
Yeah.
the stuff, the situations which are challenging for us, where we see ourselves jumping away or avoiding or whatever. Our nervous system is often taking us in and out of openness to the stuff that's going on around us, you know, and so at some points, you know, you need a certain, if you could just be doing, okay, I'm going to do my bioenergetics, I'm going to do my bone arch, and it just hits you one day that, oh, I don't want to do this stuff anymore, there's no point. Now, there's a fundamental existential crisis there, because you don't really know whether that's true. It might be true. It might not be the right thing for you to do. You might need to move on to something else entirely. Or it might be that something has been triggered from inside, from your unconscious, your body. It's coming closer to the surface, and your nervous system is coming in and playing this narrative in your mind. And so this is a kind of, you know, we don't have a way to know which of those two is true. You know, if
Yeah.
changing the practice is good, when you'd committed to a month, after 17 days, you're like, no, I just can't be bothered with this anymore. Or I just got to do this instead. You know, you don't have a way of knowing whether that's true or not. So you do need a kind of some level of discipline, you know, and a desire to know whether some of the narratives that your mind plays are necessarily true, you know. They may be, they may not be.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it necessary to bring a certain intensity to the exercises, um, or am I?
Yeah, I mean, it's good to try. I usually tell people, you know, to increase the breathing a little bit more with most bioenergetic things, you know, and to make a little bit of sound on the out breath, like just enough that you could hear it yourself, you
Okay.
know, like something you're up in your exhale, kind of, you're stretching and you're doing the thing, just to try and keep the person in the body. But with
Okay.
this kind of thing, you don't necessarily really need to ramp the breathing right up, or really push yourself like crazy. I mean, when
Okay.
you get more into the work, like you've been doing it for 6 months, and you're getting more committed, you know, then you know there are times when you really want to push it a bit, you know,
Okay.
to try and get through things, and whatever. But initially, it's more like, is this suitable for me? And can I? What's a kind of tangible and realistic level that I can commit to it for the next couple of months and something like that.
Okay. Okay. What are the biggest obstacles students face doing this work? Is it from what you said? I think just the discipline and commitment to keep going would be it. But is there other things?
The nervous system is the classic thing. Sometimes people just get really into it for a while, and then it's like they're just hit by something, like some inner
Okay.
kind of tornado, and they just find themselves out of their body half the time. And usually what's happened then, when something's starting to really move from deep inside, the nervous system's come in like a sort of hyperprotective mother, that is determined not to have her little darling kind of ever subjected to old stuff, even though by now we probably could process it quite well, and it's just taken the person out. So
Okay.
that's definitely a big problem. At the end of the day, with stuff like bioenergetics, you're putting a program into the body. Basically, you're putting a program into the body, into your daily schedule, which is starting to kind of kickstart your body's own capacity to heal itself psychologically. That's what it's trying to do. And so you need
Okay.
to keep running the program. You may need to adjust it a bit here and there, but you need to keep running the program, and take guidance and whatever. But like, that's fundamentally what you're doing. And then stuff will start to unravel, and other parts of you will get bootstrapped back online, where even bits of your natural cognitive facilities have declined a bit, or difficulty in introspecting, difficulty in kind of speaking about what's going on inside, or this kind of thing. It starts to come back online. As you get more sensation in the body, the average person feels more safe to be vulnerable, and feels more safe to take a position, basically, to actually take a position for themselves, which may not be popular with, as they perceive it, the people around them. Those two sides come out more.
Cool. Cool. I'm curious about the results people see. There's some sort of testimonial videos on your YouTube channel. There was one with Raphael. He said, we talked about his experience. He said, it's kind of beyond what you could imagine. That's a quote, which is a pretty like strong endorsement. And then something he also said was it kind of reminded me of like my experience with meditation, where if you, he said, doing bioenergetics every day and then having a gap, there was kind of a backsliding that would happen if he stopped doing it. But then if he reestablished it, he would get grounded again very quickly. And I'm just curious about people's results, I guess generally, and then also how much is it permanent change versus is it kind of like you're stepping forward and you stop, you kind of go back, but you also are always kind of moving forward. You're moving back a little bit, you're moving forward, you're moving back, you're moving forward, or how, how
Well,
do the,
yeah, people are different, so
okay.
with someone who's kind of stopped, that's quite common. You get on it for a while, and then you kind of get off it for a while, and then you come back on. If that getting off was kind of nervous system mediated in some way, which you have no easy way of establishing, then there will be a sliding back.
Yeah.
A key to understand this stuff is that the program of repression that we kind of, from the cultural conditioning or the trauma that we've been through, it's written into the body. It's written into certain tensions or dead zones in the body fascia, which is like this interconnecting tissue we have inside, and also into the muscle system. Now that starts to exert a certain, so that happens, and then really every morning when we wake up, that program is booted up of who we are. The me that we know. Even though it's a bit dysfunctional, we kind of know it. and it
Yeah.
acts rather like an autonomous agent in the sense that it doesn't just want to go away. Your sense of self might be utterly dysfunctional, but it will still nevertheless often fight quite hard to remain in control of you. That's just kind of how it goes. And because there is this physical substrate of the personality, in a sense, in the body, it takes a while for it to start to move and unravel.
Yeah.
At some point, you start to develop more self awareness. And, that is the kind of ultimate healing kind of balm in the sense that certain unhelpful behaviors, you probably aren't going to go back to them. You probably just aren't going to go back to them because you kind of know where that goes. And furthermore, and more importantly, the charge of repressed energy in your body, which was driving you down that avoidant behavior, be it an addiction or spacing out or whatever, that charge has dissipated so that it's no longer hardwiring your behavior in certain situations, in certain non-fulfilling negative directions. And you can develop awareness of the behavior. Often we're caught up in addictive behaviors and we don't even really realize it. And as you start to take, and what's cementing that negative behavior in place, or non-fulfilling behavior, or whatever you want to call it, is this charge of repressed energy in the body and the mind or nervous system's desire not to come into contact with it. As you start to release it, the old negative drive to overeat, consume internet pornography, or whatever it might be, that's to spend your life, in your mind, it's less hardwired in place and more choices manifest to you, more possibilities manifest in your mind if you've previously got an established behavior of low self-esteem as a mechanism to avoid, basically, which is a typical mechanism, defense mechanism, basically. If you keep yourself down in your own inner world, it reduces the chance of you hitting parts of yourself inside where there's a lot of old stored emotion, because you're just not doing very much. You're moving around in a very small kind of track in your daily life and you're not taking many risks. As you start to release some of that charge, the possibility of taking more risk comes to you. Hey, I could apply for that job, which is a bit of a high flyer job. I could chase after that attractive man, woman, maybe I am good enough now or whatever. Other options kind of manifest inside your personality, inside your mind, So there's an expansion that comes. Can't
Yeah.
remember what your question was now. Sorry, I just got off on it.
No, that was great. Yeah. A lot of compulsive behavior, it feels like that, where there's just some drive happening that, that's really out of conscious awareness. And so I could see how opening things up more, those drives would run things less, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit of a kind of slightly tangential point, but a big point of opposition historically between Freud and Reich, as Freud as the kind of grandfather of psychology and Reich as a student, back in the 20s, was over this concept of death drive, which Freud had established in the wake of World War One. And so even now, a lot of people working in certain areas of continental philosophy or psychology, they're like, there's this death drive which is drawing us towards the negative. But I'm not entirely convinced, and Reich wasn't entirely convinced either. It can simply be that the drive has become pushing in that direction as a way of avoiding a real confrontation with the energy or repressed energy or emotion inside the body.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. What about students you work with? Do you see lifestyle changes? What kind of lifestyle changes do you see?
Well, these days I'm not doing as many one-to-ones. I've just started up running groups again.
Okay.
I think in terms of lifestyle changes, it's just that your negative behaviors have less hold over you.
Yeah.
The self-destructive stuff that you're aware that you're doing has less hold over you, basically. So, or you just feel better, So the lifestyle changes will be specific to the individual. But if, say, they're caught up in, typically often people go out with the same kind of person. It doesn't work 3 times in a row, 4 times in a row. And then, they're just attracted to the same kind of guy, same kind of woman. They kind of know it's not going to work, but they're still just careering down that pathway, because this charge inside is kind of driving them that way. And the mind has become kind of hardwired to seek certain desires of sexuality through a certain kind of person. It's all intertwined with archetypal world as well. That kind of stuff stops. It's like, or I get people who have really struggled to stand up for themselves. They're obsessed with connection, and that they just end up in total pleaser mode. So then those guys, they do the work, particularly if they focus on that issue, they start to drop the pleaser. It becomes much easier for them just to put up a clear boundary to something they don't want. The boss who's always kind of picking on them to kind of do the extra little bit of homework, overtime or whatever, or the partner that's kind of always dumping on them a bit or whatever. That they develop the capacity to much more easily put up boundaries. So it certainly helps if you come to therapy with a specific goal that's tangible for you, but even without that, you can see changes happening. You can just jump in and see certain changes happening.
Cool.
So it's hard to give a kind of blanket,
Yeah.
but I'd certainly say there are certain areas of our typical psychology where this kind of therapy is particularly suitable. And, maybe not everything, but it's particularly suitable.
Cool. Yeah. What's the experience for people when difficult material comes up? Like if you get really into the practice, there's a lot of stuff, is it energetic, kind of non-conceptual things, or is there like memories get triggered, things like that?
Typically what happens, say, because like I said, most people have got quite a lot buried, it's like, typically something you can find. What happens is that when something is triggered and it's coming up into your psyche to be repressed, and it's quite chunky, it's quite big, it gets projected on the outside world. You may not have had you may not have a massive trip with your boss or something like that, but one day you just realize, this guy's really, really bugging me now. It's just like he's always trying to control me or whatever. And it could be some submerged kind of aspect of a relationship with a parent or something. It's coming up. It feels super intense, and you feel this just massive righteous anger at something out there. Or you feel a massive sexual attraction towards a certain type of partner or whatever. That's kind of how it works. So, these things certainly can spin people out for a while. And, it's quite common for people to report that when they get into this work, they feel themselves on a bit of an emotional roller coaster. If anger was blocked in their psyche and now they start to access it, it can first come up like a real fire. It's like, and suddenly they see themselves at kind of DEFCON 1 in these really low level social situations, and it freaks them out.
Okay.
It's like that kind of stuff can happen, definitely. And it's obviously from having a psychological overview on yourself, it's good. Yes, I know I need to access the anger and that kind of thing, but it can still be very, very challenging when it actually happens. When you feel the energy of that fire inside of you, it can be super challenging and still spin you out, no matter how much you know about the psychology of these processes.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there kind of I would think it's kind of there's an adaptation period maybe where you're used to suppressing the anger. Now you're feeling it in your body. It's going to take a little getting used to. Is that?
Yeah, well, the background practice is just to spend some time. Typically, when very strong emotions come up, anxiety is also triggered. That's natural because you don't kind of know where it's going. Who am I becoming? Whatever. Nervous system is triggered.
Okay.
And so if you can catch that and be aware that that's going on inside of you and not, because the typical experience of anxiety is it's almost like an inner voice telling you you're not okay right now. It's kind of
Yeah.
saying you need to change your state. You need to change your state. It's not necessarily engaging you with what's really going on underneath. It's just this kind of program trying to get you to change so that you don't keep feeling what's there underneath the surface. But if you can kind of catch that going on and say, whoa, I'm actually in major anxiety right now, I'm just freaking out and I'm really getting angry at my wife or boyfriend or whatever, boss. And like, and just say, okay, something's going on inside of me. And if I can just spend time simply feeling my body, literally just sitting down, putting the attention on the sensation of a body for 10 minutes, that allows something to start to process. Because in the sensation of the body, it's like the deepest layer of processing, this gradual expansion of the sensation of the body. It allows all that's repressed to slowly and naturally process, because it is easy. Often people start this stuff and not much is happening, or for a certain type of person, they just want some more emotion and energy to come back into their life. And then it starts to happen, and then it's like, oh shit, I didn't want anything to happen, and now I just want it to go away, but they kind of know that it needs to process. And so, devoting some time to just sensation of the body is useful. And then just trying to look objectively, which is not always easy. Do I need to go more deeply into that feeling, drive myself in there, or do I need to more hang out on the sidelines and just kind of just keep on feeling?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's all of us. We want our lives to change, but without having to do anything too uncomfortable. Just still stay in our
Yeah,
comfort zone. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, discomfort. You're gonna, for any kind of meaningful change to happen, there has
yeah,
to be kind of discomfort. It's just not
yeah,
going to really work otherwise.
yeah, yeah. And you mentioned the lower back as a place where a lot of issues get stored, um, and that people even kind of don't have feeling in the lower back. From meditation and other area, I've worked some is in the solar plexus. There's a lot of complex stuff there. Does it solar plexus come up in this work, or is that, do you see that as a important area too? Just curious.
Oh, well, I mean, I know some traditions do. I tend to personally focus more just on the belly, which is just kind
Okay.
of general area around here. And then the
Yeah.
solar plexus is kind of just a little bit above there and stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm more focused on that as a general broad area,
Yeah.
really.
Okay. I was
But,
just curious. Yeah.
there's a lot of deep stuff in that area for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what do you see the role of like sort of negative emotions? What is the function of anger?
I mean, a very simple kind of useful definition, psychologically useful definition of anger is the body or the brain's natural reaction to any perceived sense of invasion. It's like,
Okay.
whether that be like a physical, someone just coming way too close to you suddenly, on the subway or whatever without any kind of warning. Anger will be triggered as a way to kind of push that out and reestablish a safe sense of boundaries. Likewise, on a kind of more egotistical psychological level, if someone is always shutting you down, not allowing you your natural kind of sense of freedom, anger again will be triggered to kind of push back, so you can say, hey, let me speak, I feel like you're shutting me down all the time, or whatever, it's like they're going to, that process kicks off just to keep like a safe boundary. So anger absolutely has validity, and obviously, it can get out of control, and it can also be used as a way to maintain control, in a negative sense. But to call anger a negative emotion to me is like probably not that useful. I know a lot
Okay.
of people from meditative background get very concerned about anger, but I think it's important to also acknowledge that it's we have anger because we evolved anger as a protective mechanism to establish safe boundaries. And
Yeah.
certain types of wounds, often when we can express enough anger, fully, just in a therapeutically held situation, it allows a process to move on, like with Liz Kubler-Ross and her 5 stages of grieving and stuff like that. Often people, they try to forgive someone for something bad that's happened in their life, and they feel like it's fake, it's not really happening. Or if they feel like it's fake and it's not really happening, it's often because there's the anger hasn't come out yet. The anger
Yeah.
sometimes has to come out and be felt before we can actually let go and forgive. People are trying to forgive, but it's just not really working or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you say like anger maybe has I don't know the right term, maybe a positive or kind of healthy expression, and maybe a not so useful or kind of, there's, I think we've all experienced anger where we thought, oh, that wasn't helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing to learn often with anger, it's like, when anger's been blocked inside, then at certain times in the developmental journey, you may find yourself just being constantly pulled into confrontational situations because it's trying to project itself on, whether online or which is not often so useful, or in person.
Okay.
Uh, that's one thing when it's been blocked inside. Often what people actually need to learn is just how to set clear boundaries, in a non-charged manner, you know,
Yeah.
like uh, there's this guy in the States, I think Marshall Rosenberg, nonviolent communication. Often they teach that in prisons to, men who've become habituated to using violence or anger, in certain defensive situations or whatever. Instead of stabbing inmate 625, you've got to say, "Hey, I didn't like it when you took your place in front of me in the food queue or whatever." It's
Yeah.
like it's often by understanding anger, what it's trying to do is reestablish healthy boundaries. Often, what you need to
Okay.
do is look for a more socially useful and intelligent way to establish that boundary and practice it so you feel confident.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great answer. I love it. Do you see a difference between how like Europeans and Americans view therapy? I've just heard that in Europe it's kind of viewed differently than in the United States. I don't know if it probably varies by country. I was just kind of curious if you had any
I
opinion on
mean,
that.
view therapy, I don't know. I mean, something that's clear to me, also being mixed race, living adjacent to the Middle East in Turkey and working a bit with clients from that area, is like therapy is probably, it's come from this very white kind of background, without any
Okay.
negativity associated with that. It just has, it's come from Vienna originally and then kind of spread out from there, particularly in the wake of World War II and stuff. And, it's inevitably orientated around trying to get the person to behave in a certain kind of socially positive manner, and that may be quite different from people to person. Also, cultures outside the West, tend to be much more invested in the extended family system, that kind of thing. The dynamics are different. So certainly maybe not their view of therapy, which is what you asked, but the outcomes that they're trying to achieve could be considerably different from different places.
Yeah.
I don't know. Have you picked up like an intimation that the average European views therapy differently from the average American? Would you say?
It's just something. It's something I've heard that in like in maybe like in Italy, I've heard. Oh, it's not something. Therapy is like for people that are more crazy or something. It's like you have real problems if you're going to therapy. Whereas in the States, lots of people go to therapy, and it's maybe a sign of being emotionally healthy that you went to therapy. So I was
Yeah,
just curious.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah. I think that's a really good point. I think that's a really good point. I didn't think of that. But yes, yes. It's also in the same way that the desired outcome is based on the social societal conditioning a bit. It's
Yeah.
also yes, the societal conditioning, say in England, is often to kind of carry on, stiff upper lip and
Yeah.
carry on regardless. You might have 27 major psychological problems, impacting your brain all day long, but I'm fine, not a problem, And then to say therapy, it's like you're kind of inviting, oh, you're in a mess. Then obviously, if you're going to therapy, so certainly I'd consider the American attitude, as you describe it, a great deal more healthy than this kind of stigmatizing kind of concept they have more in places like Europe. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just yeah, I was just curious. And then any tips for trying to decide if this work is right for them? I mean, I guess you said go ahead, just start and try it and do it for a month and see if you're seeing results. Anything else?
I mean, it's a little bit. I'm just in the process of finishing off my first kind of theory book on body based therapy, and I did try to really write out and be just honest and practical about the kind of things it's really good for and the kind of stuff it might not be good for. But
Yeah.
couples work or stuff like that, it's probably not so inclined towards. It's more for individuals who want to go on a deep kind of inner journey,
Okay.
and overcome some stuff on the way. It may work for you if you've got depression or chronic fatigue. It may not. You can only try it.
Okay.
For people who've got anxiety and who feel quite deeply committed to overcome it, it won't be like a band-aid kind of thing, but it could really help.
Hmm.
For people who are a bit of a doormat, it can definitely help, because you're
Okay.
getting more energy going in your system. If you feel like you're a bit of a pleaser, for people who feel like I'm just always in control and my life is dull because I'm just always in control, again, it could be really, really, it could be really, really useful. If you're someone who's a bit on the edge of proper mental health conditions, you probably need some kind of expert advice around the exercises, but they're not too evocative for you. If you are a little bit towards the psychotic edge, you can kind of like really spend way too much time out of your body. You've got to be a little bit careful with things like that. But it can still work. It's just that it's just to take things at a good pace. And I mean, I guess also if there's still exercises you can do if you're really old, for sure, like in your 70s or 80s. But obviously, you have to maybe, until you've got used to stuff, you need to take anything physical, a bit more kind of gently and practically.
Yeah. 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 Well, thanks for taking the time to speak with me. I really enjoyed this. I've been already excited about your work. I'm more excited now. I'm gonna go and buy your 52-week bioenergetics self-paced course now. I think after this, I think
All right. Well,
I was already tempted to buy it, but I'm definitely going to go buy it after this. So you'll get at least one sale from the interview, and hopefully more.
okay, cool. I mean, actually, I kind of stopped selling. There's always this huge selling thing going on, but I found I haven't really needed to do that, which is very, very kind of gratifying as a therapist because it is a little bit kind of on the edge of ethical, I think. Ethical, unethical to just be really, come and do this, come and do that, come and do this, and subscribing people into your kind of thing all the time.
Yeah.
But it's been a pleasure talking to you, Todd, and thank you for asking such, beautiful questions.
Yeah. Thank you. Maybe you want to share what things that are coming up for you or anything else.
Well, at the minute, I'm mostly working in person in Tbilisi in Georgia, which is probably not so accessible for most people in the States, so easily accessible. And a little bit in London, some workshops. You can find those on my website, which you're going to put there. Most of my stuff you can find, because my name is so kind of weird in the way it developed and whatever, Devaraj Sandberg, there aren't any more of those around. So just a Google or AI search is going to find my content pretty quickly as a rule.
Cool. Cool. Well, thanks again. I really appreciate it. And
Thank you. Thank you,
yeah,
Todd.
thanks.
Pleasure to speak to you, man.